Crypto launchpads are all the rage. In the past, investors had to risk investing in projects that may be scams, and launchpads are a way to make new and potentially valuable tokens available to more people with a higher degree of safety. They're kind of like a filter for crypto projects. Now the question is, should you invest in a launchpad and get access to new and exciting crypto projects? So I wanted to do the work here and give you as much valuable information as humanly possible on the best launchpads available to you today and why I think those have potential. And then of course, I'm going to talk about the risks involved when you're considering putting your cash behind these projects, including 5 key metrics that you want to look for in each project. Now, what is a launchpad? You've likely heard about them within the last few months given how popular they've been this year, but I want to do a quick definition check here because we need to differentiate between a launchpad and a launch pool. A launch pool is basically another form of an initial stake offering. With a launch pool, you stake a crypto like Binance's BNB token into a specific stake pool. You are then paid staking rewards in the form of tokens for a brand new small cap crypto project. So for example, let's say you wanted to invest in a imaginary new crypto called the Max token. The Max token would have a pool where you can stake your crypto in and be paid back in Max token. This would give you exposure to the Max token with near zero risk. Now, a launchpad is a more involved platform that allows you to buy the token of a launchpad and get exposure directly to new and exciting crypto projects that kind of do some of the work for you. They get all of these project proposals sent to them. They do a bit of filtering and then they put offerings on their site. The simplest way that I can describe them, they're the crypto equivalent of startup incubators. So believe it or not, it takes a lot of work to create a new crypto project, at least a good one. Much like a traditional startup, teams of people need to come together and establish what value it is that they're going to provide, how they're going to operate, and ultimately what they have to do to make sure that their business is successful. And this is particularly important because in the crypto space, projects don't normally sell shares of their actual business. Instead, tokens are sold to investors, and then the hope is that those tokens will appreciate and increase in price. The trouble is, because of the sheer number of tokens on the market, and there's more being added every day, it's very easy to get duped by hype and bad actors.
Bullshit. I did not hit her.
You know, crypto projects that are basically scams in order to make the founders some quick bucks, and then they're gone. And sometimes they can do that without ever even showing their faces.
Where's the money, Lebowski?
And then the problem that's created here is it becomes really hard for excellent crypto startups, you know, the ones that are actually high quality, to break through the noise of all these other garbage projects and stand out when they should stand out, but there's just so many projects to filter through. Now, launchpads are actually crypto projects in themselves, but because they have the name recognition and the trust built up over time, investors can use them as a filter because they're effectively putting their neck out for a new crypto project. And in that way, crypto projects get to benefit because they get to filter through all the noise, and investors get a benefit because, again, the noise is filtered through, and ideally the best projects stand out and shine among the rest. Now we'll get into some examples of the most popular launchpads in 2021 in just a second, but first we need to take a second to explain how launchpads work and why I think they could be better than the older, more familiar ICO process. So launchpads like Polkastarter and Binance Launchpad each have their own tokens that are available for investors to hold and to trade. And then when you hold the tokens of a launchpad, you become eligible to get early access to all of the projects hosted on a launchpad. So you can think of this kind of as like a private invitation system to invest into the new projects that they have done diligence and they filter out. So by holding a crypto token of a launchpad, you show yourself to be this well-intentioned investor, meaning someone that's willing to go long-term on the projects that the launchpad supports. Now, one limitation of this process is that many launchpads have a kind of tiered system, where often the largest holders of that launchpad's token are given guaranteed positions in new projects, and everyone else on the lower tiers of investment are given lottery allocations. Some launchpads only offer lottery allocations, and what this means is you aren't always guaranteed to be able to invest in their supported projects because that limited supply of early release tokens is either assigned at random or is reserved only for the participants of a launchpad that are most invested in that launchpad. But the more a launchpad launches new successful projects, even if you don't have access to invest directly into all of them, the price of that Launchpad's token has the potential to increase as well. So you kind of have this double potential of the Launchpad token and new project tokens as well, where if the Launchpad is doing an excellent job in picking great projects, your token will go up. And if you have the opportunity to invest in one of those tokens, that also goes up. This kind of doubles the reward, but of course that can also amplify the risk as well. The trick here is deciding how a Launchpad could fit into your very own investing strategy. So consider how much you're willing to invest and just how far you can go to support new projects. So if you have bricks of cash lying around that you want to put into new projects and you have a high tolerance for risk, these are all very high risk, then go ahead and get yourself a top tier spot in a Launchpad with guaranteed token allocations. And you'd be fine if you have fat stacks of cash and a high tolerance for risk. But that isn't the case for most people. So on the opposite side of the extreme, if you just want to get your feet wet with new projects, you could invest a little bit lower, go low tier with a Launchpad, and still be investing in the Launchpad's tokens without a whole lot of commitment, and you still would have some opportunity if the lottery lands on your name to get some of the new projects as well. But still, this is on the higher risk side of the spectrum when it comes to investing. It's crypto investing and startup crypto investing combined. Fun fact here, Launchpads sometimes launch other newer, smaller Launchpads as well. So it kind of reminds me of those like Russian dolls where you open one and then there's like a smaller one and then a smaller one all the way down. So Launchpads value to both investors and new crypto projects is that they create communities. These are platforms where investors can communicate with each other about what makes projects valuable and allows us all to gain insight into which projects have real potential. So just again, think filtering down into what may be the projects with the highest odds for success, but that does not guarantee success. So now let's talk about some popular and interesting Launchpads. So the first example that I want to give you is Binance Launchpad. So Binance, they're the largest crypto exchange platform on the planet. In January 2020, they announced that they'd launch a new token fundraising system, the Binance Launchpad platform. And the first project whose tokens went on sale was of the file sharing platform BitTorrent. The hype behind this launch was staggering, raising over $7 million in less than 15 minutes. For the people in the back, $7 million in 15 minutes. It's insane. They have since launched a host of other projects, each of those projects raising millions of dollars in very short periods of time. Fetch AI was a Binance launch as well. They brought in $6 million in 10 seconds. 10 seconds. So the biggest sell for investing in Binance Launchpad is reputation, if you ask me. So Binance has a reputation to protect. And with this, they're more likely to heavily vet projects that are coming on their desk. So before Binance chooses to support a project through its Launchpad, a ton of research and project information are made available to users, which as a research person myself, I very much appreciate. So each new project comes with its own report where you can see how many tokens will be available at the launch, the stage of the development that the project is in, and any other information you might need. And this has honestly made me consider starting my own Launchpad because of my love for research and building communities. We'll call it the MaxiPad. Sorry. So to participate in Binance Launchpad offerings, you need to be a holder of the BNB token and sign up. Each offering is slightly different, so you'll want to take a look at the terms and conditions for each. And Binance will obviously recommend that you'll look into each report before you decide to put your money into those tokens, and I do too. Always do your own due diligence. Now, not everyone is going to be able to invest in a Binance-supported project due to the high demand, though. I mean, like we said, $6 million in 10 seconds, not everyone is able to get their spot. And Binance will likely remain one of the largest launchpads, especially with this kind of reputation, at least until the MaxiPad comes out, and we're just gonna squash that Binance Launchpad. Now, the next example that I want to talk about is TrustSwap. What I like about TrustSwap is that they address a very specific problem when it comes to early investing. So often a new coin can get so hyped that its price just skyrockets within the first few days or the first few hours, and then just dumps after the initial wave. And of course, this kind of activity is detrimental to new projects, even those with real value. An early drop in price has this psychological effect on investors that you see that drop and then you just start thinking like, oh, this project is a dud. And remember, no one wants to buy a turd mid-flush. So we're all worried about that as investors. TrustSwap, though, has a few clever innovations in place to protect projects from immediate sell-offs and protect investors from empty promises made by overhyped projects. One example of this is how TrustSwap locks pre-release tokens for a set period, or they'll set staggering release periods to incentivize early buyers to hold. This actually works out really well for all holders. So not only does the project get supported by early funding for long enough to meet its goals, but this also lets investors have confidence in the upwards price movement, meaning they don't feel like they have to sell because the project jumped by 100%, because they know that there's a bit of a lock, there's mechanisms in place. This is very helpful if you have weak hands. Now, one possible downside to this kind of vesting is if the project demand goes down, but the emission schedule continues, meaning more and more coins are added into circulation, there's this kind of inflation effect where that can still decrease the price. So even if you do trust the Launchpad that you've invested in, you always want to make sure you're aware of project specifics so you know what can potentially happen in the future. I'll pin a video above on how to evaluate crypto projects that you definitely want to watch. There's a checklist. It's very helpful. Now let's talk about the risks. Risk number one is the investment requirement. So even though Launchpads, they make token pre-sales more accessible than ever before, more accessible to the average retail investor, they still can be quite pricey. So for example, take the Launchpad Polka Starter. They require you to hold 3,000 POL tokens, POL tokens, which is roughly about $4,000 US before you're eligible to participate in launches. And that can price many retail investors out who it wouldn't be wise for them to invest $4,000 into a Launchpad, into a brand new crypto project if their portfolio isn't already diversified. Now, speaking of diversified, the second risk comes with the business model of Launchpads. So because these companies are in the business of incubating and supporting other companies, the Launchpad itself becomes strongly affiliated with projects. So like I mentioned earlier, if a Launchpad has tons of successful projects on it, that Launchpad is going to do better. The token is going to appreciate in price. The opposite is true as well. If they pick a couple duds, that will decrease the value of the Launchpad and the tokens that are held by investors. Now you can manage your exposure by investing in multiple Launchpads, which of course can get pricey due to minimum expenses, or by choosing to invest at those lower tier levels. As always, you want to decide your strategy before you start investing. Now, for most people who are new to crypto or new to investing in general, investing into a Launchpad may be getting ahead of yourself a little bit, as it just takes experience to be able to evaluate and ask the right questions. If you're brand new, you're not even going to think of the right questions to ask to determine if that project is a solid investment for you. Now, of course, you could go with a trusted Launchpad and just take their word for it whenever they release a new project, but I would not advise that at all because I think you should always do your own research. But the good news is you can focus your research efforts on popular Launchpads, and this will narrow down your choices. So instead of having to look into 100 projects, you could maybe look into 2 or 3, and that doesn't take a whole lot of time. You also could join a private community like ours, linked down in the description, through Patreon, because myself and literally hundreds of other people are researching and talking about our findings on that group literally every single day, and that can save you hours and hours, if not days, of time and effort. So in conclusion, crypto Launchpads are one of the most popular innovations in the crypto space within the last year, and I can see exactly why. I mean, they have a way of cutting through the noise by investing in projects that they themselves have determined to be valuable, and then you get to determine of those, like a filter within a filter, of those which ones that you think you should invest in as well. So they cut down on research time for adventurous investors looking to find that next 10x or even 100x potential project. They also allow the average investor, and not just loaded venture capitalists, to participate in coin offerings on a level playing field, which of course I love. There's fewer barriers to information and entry. Now, it's important to consider 5 things before you buy into a Launchpad project. First, what is the timeline of the project? Second, what is the release schedule for the tokens? Third, how much do I need to hodl before I can participate in sales events? Fourth, do I believe in the team and the technology behind that project? And do I believe that they are solving a problem with money behind it? And fifth, Will I want to invest in more projects from this Launchpad in the future? You want to know where you should allocate your funds. Unless you have unlimited funds, then you can just allocate them everywhere. But I don't think most people don't have unlimited funds.
5 million.
That's a utility belt, not a money belt. 6 million.
7 million.
Once you've answered these questions for yourself, you can decide if investing in a Launchpad is right for you, or if you'd rather go with more mature projects. So I hope that this was helpful. Make sure you click that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a profitable day.